Should be good now.
I'm on pause.
Of May 10th of the Planning and Zoning Commission to order at 7:03 PM. Regular members in attendance are Steve Sicardi, Phil West, Christine Gray, James Laporta. We have two alternates, Bruce Bennett and Will Evans. We'll seat Bruce for Keith Bodwell. Am I missing anyone? No. I think that's all our members. And I'm going to ask for a motion to amend the agenda. I actually need two such motions. But do we vote to amend on each motion?
No, you
Karen?
could list both of them and have one motion to amend.
Okay. The amendments include SP 250, a certificate of zoning compliance for the new restaurant, which is good news, and an 824 referral from the Board of Selectmen. Could I have a motion to amend the agenda for those two items?
So moved.
Second?
Second. I'll second then.
So who was the first? James?
Steve.
Steve.
Okay.
All in favor, say aye or raise your hand. Okay. So that passes, and we will move both of those motions to be associated with staff reports from Karen. Does that make sense, Karen?
Yep.
Okay. So first, approval of minutes. I know the minutes came to everybody late. If anybody would prefer, we could move to postpone voting, talking about them until next meeting. Does anybody feel so inclined? In that case,
Just to review them.
okay. In that case, could I have a motion to approve the minutes as written?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Okay. If you unmute yourself, Christine, you could actually use your voice too.
I'm unmuted, but I wasn't around for that meeting. So I'm
correct.
going to abstain. I'm sorry.
Yes, very good.
I read the minutes, but I don't know if they're right.
That's the proper approach. Very good. You know the rules better than I do. Okay, all in favor, raise your hands. So the minutes pass. We're going to move on to new applications. Actually, on my agenda, the B24, the 824 referral is right here under new applications.
But
So go
now
ahead,
we're-
Karen,
yeah.
tell us what it entails.
This 824 referral is to allow the town to grant an easement to Blaine Matthews for the repair, replacement, or maintenance of a pipe that goes under Whitcomb Hill Road. His home is on one side. He has a vacant lot on the other side that currently has a very in failure septic system that needs to be repaired. The pipe carrying the effluent is under Whitcomb Hill Road. Whitcomb Hill Road is town property, so the easement has to be granted for any work to be done, whether the pipe needs replacement or what have you. The paperwork refers to a map. The septic system is in the process of final approval, and the final easement language is being prepared by Area Health. But in the meantime, it is something that we've been working on for several months to get under control and is sadly needed because the septic system is not good. It shouldn't, yeah. So it goes to town meeting. This 8-24 enables the town to vote on it at the May meeting. And it is really I hate to call it a no-brainer, but it is something that has to be done.
And
Karen.
it does require a town meeting to approve it.
It
It's
has
not
to,
something
yeah, an
P&Z
8-24
approves.
referral is needed, and it's already on the call of the May 20th town meeting.
Okay.
How old is the pipe? How was it put under the road without an easement in the first place?
Well, that's an interesting question. Years ago, there's other properties, including some on Sharon Goshen Turnpike, that have septic systems across the road. New practice, probably for 20 or 30 years, is that the road divides property. Years ago, if you had property on both sides of the road, it was one parcel. Now they are considered two parcels, and the town owns what is in the middle. So it is not accepted practice to have septic systems on a separate parcel from, especially under the road. It is just no longer allowed. The assessor would not approve, cannot approve it being considered one lot divided by a road. So
But
this will
because,
remain,
but because it's pre-existing, we're grandfathering that in and
yes,
allowing,
because there's absolutely no place on his property, the house property on the upside for septic system.
okay,
There's lots of historic precedent for this situation. There was one horrible situation involving what we now know as Railroad Plaza. And that was a
Yeah.
terrific mess
Yep.
decades ago. So
Do we need
But
a
it was-
motion? Are you?
when it was installed, it was all done properly, right? This wasn't,
Yes.
it wasn't,
Yes, because it was really considered one piece of land at the time, and
Okay.
now it's no longer considered that. It is causing some problems, but this also makes it easier for land use officials and people like myself to tell a realtor that they can't sell the vacant piece across the street and try to put another house on it when it takes away the capacity for the house across the street to ever have an expanded septic system, a new septic system, or repaired septic system. So these vacant parcels, this will be tied with easement language that says that one parcel cannot be sold separately, that they are inherently tied by this easement language. And Torrington Area Health is actually the one with the strongest language in terms of the final easements that have to be put on the deed, so as to be protected, that somebody cannot come in and deed off the septic system on a separate, separate sale. Yeah. Plus the downhill side is all wetlands and hill. You can barely get a septic system in on the vacant parcel, never mind another house. Yeah.
okay. Phil had a question?
Well, two things. One's a pet peeve, but we really should probably have a motion on this before we have the discussion, but that's fine. I will make a motion that we correct me if my verbiage is wrong, but submit the 824
Yep.
referral to the to the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah.
As it's written
They-
here in our.
Yep.
In our.
I will put the final formal language all together for the town
Right.
clerk with the
Yep.
legal language. Yes.
So I'll make that motion.
second,
James seconded it. Is there any further discussion? And thank you, Phil, for keeping us honest. Or rather, Roberts. Okay, all in favor, raise hands, please. Thank you. That passes unanimously. Under pending applications, I guess we have none. Is that
Right.
correct?
That's correct.
And then we're down to staff reports. So Karen, you're on again.
All right, well, I normally don't add certificate of zoning compliances to the agenda, but I thought that this warranted a special shout out. Let's put it that way. SP 250, West Cornwall Development Group, change of use of the barn that was currently under special permit for a detached accessory apartment was changed to a restaurant at our last in-person meeting, June 14th, 2020. It is now all of area health is in place. I've signed off on the liquor permit. The certificate of zoning compliance will refer to the original map with a few minor modifications, one being the handicapped ramp that's been added to the back. And then the infill of one corner. It is not expanding the foundation or anything. It was just allowed to be infilled to expand the restaurant use. There was a soft community meeting the other night at Saturday night down at Frank's Way, in which community members were thanked for their help. Gordon Ridgway being the one that was given the most accolades for his 5 years of work to get this done. And I'm saying this, I I like to put a positive note in every meeting, but the fact that this special permit approved with a lot of community input, a lot of neighbors that were contacted by the owners of the restaurant, has really resulted in it being a really community welcome place. It was very obvious with the group that was there the other night. So you as a commission, as well as all the other people, are to be commended for having a process to make this work and cause a community meeting place to be opening up on Thursday. I understand.
good.
So thank you. I'm extending my thank yous to you as they were extended to me.
That's great to hear, Karen. Thank you very much. James may remember that one of our subcommittee meetings for the Economic Development Subcommittee for the town plan, way back in 2018, Gordon brought Jeff Morgan to us to discuss his wish to have a brew pub. Remember that?
Yeah, yeah. And we were all very enthusiastic about it.
Yeah, we gave him a lot of encouragement, so we deserve thanks too.
So that's, I
Just
think
kidding.
it's time to share and spread the wealth.
Yeah,
And I have to quickly tell you that there was one community member, Father Mark Bazzuti Jones, who is now the priest in residence at Trinity Retreat Center, came and gave the blessing to the opening of the restaurant, complete with a sage incense. Anna, you think it might be either Jamaican or tied to indigenous, whatever, but he blessed all of us with sage incense and holy water, because I got both of them. Yes, I got smoked that, and I was blessed with holy water as he went through the whole group after his blessing. It was a really nice event. It was very nice to see.
Karen, do you have anything else in your staff report?
No, that's it.
Okay. Do you have any correspondence or communications for us?
Nothing that was to the commission at large.
Okay. And under other business proper to come to the commission, I don't think I've ever seen anything come under that agenda item. I'm not sure what it's for even.
Well, usually things like election of officers, which we've done.
Okay.
And if we were to amend bylaws and things like that, which is proper business, yes.
Thanks for the training. Well then, we're going to move on to the planning workshop. We're going to have plenty of time for it. I want to say a few words before we start, because I had a light bulb go off in my head as I was reviewing Janelle's work. And it's taken me a while to figure out why this process has seemed so slow and difficult. That's how I've perceived it all. And I suddenly realized that 4 of our current commissioners worked with our former town planner, and he had a completely different approach and style. We did quite a few amendments and one brand new regulation under his tutelage, and our procedure was always to look at individual sentences, move them around, delete them, or redo the wording. And the same went with individual words, because the basic structure of our regulations didn't actually change. And that's the style I think that James and I and Steve and Phil are used to when it comes to discussing any change to our regulations. But the scope of this project is completely different, totally different from that. We couldn't possibly go through every sentence in our current regulations and look for them to be repeated in the new regulations. That's not what we're doing. We're moving sections to and consolidating them to other parts. We're adding new language that makes certain elements in our regulations clearer. And we're adding references to laws. what we as commissioners have to do is make sure that the new reformat continues to reflect the intention of our regulations and our procedures. But I don't think that we need to worry about every sentence. Does that make sense to you all? It's the gestalt that matters. I started trying to compare sentence to sentence, and it just wasn't going to work. So I think we're really lucky that we have someone like Janelle who understands both the language and the logic of zoning regulations. And I think she's doing a really great job. And therefore, I'm going to turn it over to her to start on Article 6.
Anna, thanks for that intro. I'm hoping every meeting to come with a new article, just because we are, and dare I say halfway, but we're getting somewhere, just to keep with the momentum. Our article before us this evening, it's site plan and special permit procedures. So it's not that exciting from a planning perspective because it's very prescriptive. A lot of our parameters of how we can look at site plans and evaluate them and special permits, the applications that come before the commission are very much bound by statute. What I've done, this section definitely has a lot more explanation in it than what you'll find in the current regulations. Just for everyone's reference, site plan requirements begins on page 26 of the current set of the regulations, and then special permit begins on page 32. Having them together makes a lot of sense from my perspective, and correct me if I'm wrong, just because these are the commission's applications. This is what you are tasked with reviewing, and also what you're tasked with understanding, not only what's required of an application, so all the materials that come with, but also the approval process. And then there's some really technical, detailed things like the timelines that the state holds us to, which no rhyme or reason, but we have nothing we can do about those timelines. So this article attempts to kind of bring everything into play so that the application process can be understood not only by someone in your shoes as a commissioner that needs to evaluate these applications, but also for an applicant who's coming before the commission so they know what they can do in order to provide the commission with a successful application. So I'll grab the document. Does anyone have questions before we go through the doc?
I'm not sure we need to read together this document. Could we for once try just asking people if they have questions or comments about certain sections? I have a number of things that I want to ask about, for example. Could I have a sense of the meeting? If you all would prefer to go for that Janelle go through every paragraph, we can do that. It's up to you guys what the consensus is.
I'm for every paragraph.
And me too.
Sorry, Janelle.
Isn't this our only time to kind of review this type of material at that level? I mean, not our only time, but I mean, if now's the best time probably to give the commission a chance to, because I did notice there were quite a few changes. I don't think they're substantive, but I think we just.
Okay, anybody else have any comments? I don't think you got the message that I was trying to, or maybe you have rejected the message I was giving in my introduction. Anybody else want to say anything? There are four other.
Yeah, Anna, try it again. When you proposed your thought and your idea,
Was that
I understand, but then also propose it again, and then also propose the alternative.
Okay.
So it might make it a
All
little
right.
bit clearer.
To be clear, we have two ways of approaching this. The first is for us to open the whole document to individual questions that the commissioners have based on their review of the new Article 6. My expectation is that you have all read it and looked at it and looked at our current regulations and are familiar with both. The second approach would go over it paragraph by paragraph and allow each commissioner to bring things up that way. I just think the former way is faster, but I may be dead wrong about that.
No, you're
So
probably right.
I'm not married to that first proposal. Let's put it that way.
Certainly, you're probably right. It probably is faster, but I, for one, did not read I do not read all this literature, so this is
Okay.
sort of my time to
Okay, all right.
listen to it.
I
Madam
tried
Chair.
to now. Go ahead now and let's look at
Yes.
six.
And
look at
Madam
six-
Chair, for the record, Michelle Ship has joined the meeting.
Yes, I see. Thank you.
Great.
So
Just
page
one other-
12, site 6.1, site plan applicability. Carry on, Janelle.
I feel like James has a question. I feel like Phil had words as well.
Okay,
It'll be
All
really
right.
quick.
Yeah, not just a question, just in response, I realize it would be quicker, I think, if we just ask the questions, but in terms of our regulations, it really is our rule book. And if there is something in there that's a little askewed, that we're assuming one thing, but then an application comes and it's different from what we were expecting, now's the time to catch that kind of thing. So, we really probably should have our regulations dialed in. And if they're not dialed in, it might pinch us down the road. So even though it might take a little bit longer up front, I just feel, especially in this particular section, because it isn't just verbatim from a previous section.
okay,
And
that's fine.
to James's point, I think it's a really good chance for everyone to know know their regulations. So you know where to reference different sections, and feel like you played a part in making them.
He will at least have read them thoroughly once. All right,
I
Phil.
think Phil had a
Just a-
thought.
Totally simple. Can you give a reminder of blue, green, and black?
Yes. Yes, you are reminding me. Black is from the current regulations. Typically, there is a page number tacked onto that
Yep.
for reference. The green is new, so that's going to be, whether it's a reference to something that's new in a new article, and then blue is statutory. So very much something that pretty much either verbatim came from statutes or that has been adapted for easier understanding and passing along of the information. And I do, just to James's earlier point, before I bring this particular article up, I do have to say this definitely is robust with new information. And I think a lot of that is when I look at the current regulations and I look for guidance, if I were to be submitting a site plan or a special permit, or if I were a commission evaluating a site plan or a special permit, I don't find that in the regulations. And that can lead to confusion, not only for a commissioner of what role they need to be playing when they're evaluating an application, but also for an applicant, so they know that they're doing their job with providing the correct information to the town. So there is new language in here, certainly. It's not so much new in that most of it comes from our statutes, which aren't the most exciting to read, but they're helpful. So I'll grab, starting, we're now on page 15 of the overall document. And just starting right in is the intro of what a site plan is. So it's, again, from page 26, the site plan is intended to provide the commission with information that will enable it to determine if the proposed activity, and this should not be, I already caught a typo, that the proposed activity is in compliance with the town of Cornwall zoning regulations. And I want to omit project there, just so it reads proposed activity.
Yep.
Great. So site plans are pretty straightforward. If they comply, they comply. And then this just goes on to say where this will be applicable elsewhere in the regulations. So Article 7, which we will move on to, is going to be our use chapter. And our use chapter also has the approval process associated with each use. So site plan gets referenced again in Article 7. And then also we will see it in our overlay districts. It's actually used most often within the overlay districts. And just to remind the commission, the overlay districts include the flood hazard zone, the aquifer protection area, and even the planned conservation district. Then we get into where a site plan might be applicable. Then we get into the procedure for a site plan. So prior to the issuance of a zoning permit, a lot of this is very explanatory for applicants. For any activity which requires site plan approval, an application with accompanying information shall be submitted to the Planning and Zoning Commission for its review. Then we get into mentioning, so point 2 is very much a statutory thing. If an application involves activity regulated by wetlands, they must submit their application to Cornwall's Inland Wetlands and Water Course Agency. That's statute. I think having that reminder in the zoning regulations, it's very common to see that. It's also a requirement. So it's a regulation that oftentimes there's a duly authorized zoning agent and wetlands agent that can catch these things. Then we get into, again, another statutory point, which I think is often misunderstood, is the fact that the commission can conduct a public hearing on any site plan application. So there's a lot of case law around this. In the event that there's ever a question of the commission, they wish to bring something to public hearing, they do have that enabling language within Connecticut General Statutes, Chapter 124. So 124 is the chapter all around land use, and it's Section 8-7D. And again, a lot of case law has brought this to be promulgated into legislation.
I want to remind the commission that that point became a very important point for the public and Ann Zinzer's lawyer, who all disputed it during our home business regulation. And I'm very glad to see that it's now fully documented in our regulations as something that we have the right to do.
I think a good local example, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of Falls Village and River Road Homes. So River Road Homes, pursuant to the regulations, there's a zone in Falls Village that if you have a proposal, you can get site plan approval in this particular zone. And the commission saw an application, it's a housing proposal, it's of relative public interest, and they decided this is a topic that's of public interest. We know it will be heavily discussed and debated. We are putting it out to public hearing, and it was more of just a courtesy to the general public good. So they made that call, even though it's a site plan approval and it goes through the procedural timeframe, they brought it to a public hearing.
Thank you, Janelle. That's great.
Yeah, so point 4, again, very much bound by statutes on this one. So the commission with site plans, they can approve a site plan application, deny a site plan application, approve it to subject modification. So keep in mind, modifications are not conditions. A modification would be a direction, such as, this doesn't comply with our zoning regulations, please modify your site plan so that it does. And then they would modify the site plan to change something so that it complies. That would be a modification. A condition is different and not actually applicable for site plan applications, statutorily applicable for special permits only. So just something to keep in mind. And that time frame is a 65-day. So it can be modified, denied, only if it fails to comply with the regulations that are set forth. Then we get in, oh, sorry, anyone have questions? Sorry, I don't mean to move quickly.
I just wanted to ask a question. Is there a method in which the public can force the commission to hold a site plan public hearing, which obviously is in the wetland statutes? That's why we have to delay acting on applications for 15 days for the challenge to take it to public hearing. Is there any?
Karen, that's such a good question. I know of that statute with inland wetlands with the petition. I don't believe that there is a public petition. If I imagine if the commission received enough, strongly lettered, strongly worded letters, or just felt that there was a particular site plan application that was a little bit out of the ordinary, or something that they really felt they should definitely get the public's input on. I think that in and of itself is good enough. The petition to have a public hearing is not something I've seen enabled in the statute. And I think there's.
I just want to bring that up. It's interesting that the fact that wetlands has that provision, and it can be for public interest as opposed to significant activity, but they actually is the provision about how many people, how to do it, et cetera, et cetera. But this is the commission may make that decision.
Yeah. And not to get too deep into the wetlands world, but as acting agent in other towns, I just think wetlands, it can be a different thing, proving that something is a significant activity, which is why it's written in that way really intentively. With site plans, it's black or white. Does it comply or does it not comply?
I just wanted to have that clarification because it has come up about, well, the crossing of commission and the changes between various boards. You would think it could almost be the other way around as well.
Yeah. At
Okay.
one point, I did do some research for Madam Chair regarding petitions, and she's more than welcome. She can circulate that email. I just researched when the statutes enable petitions, and wetlands was the most prominent, common example that I could think of. Certainly, petitions to change zoning regulations are also a possibility.
I'll definitely circulate that, and thank you for it.
Yeah. Then we get into citing reasons. So a lot of times it's hard to deny applications. It's even harder to deny them and give our reasons because we're so kind. and it's really hard to say no. So baked into, again, very much statute and also case law, having your final action really cited. So if you have a section of the regulations that you're using as your basis for approving or denying applications, it's really great to cite those reasons very clearly. Can make the process just more easily understood. If anyone questions an approval, if they see, pursuant to section 2.3 of the regulations, it's in compliance, that's all very forward and transparent. Final action, again, should be based on the application as originally received. So that receipt date is really, really important. Oftentimes commissions move to receive applications. So they wait until they have all of the materials. They look at the site plan. They make sure all the associated materials have been submitted. Of course, land use staff is there to provide them with all of that information, and then they actually move to receive the application so that there's an official date on the record of that receipt. Again, all tying back to these dates, because things can get tricky with statutes. If we are ever afoul of a particular statute, it really shuts down the application process, whether or not we're doing our job. If we're not adhering to these statutory time limits, the substance of our decision doesn't matter. We'll just get thrown out on a technicality. So just important to keep in mind. And then,
Janelle, could I interrupt? I'm going to encourage any, I can no longer see all of you. So if you have something to say, I'm just going to give you permission to blurt it out
that helps.
rather than try to raise your hand. Our procedure historically, since Karen has been CEO, is to receive the application after she deems it to be complete. And we don't actually make a motion to receive, we make a motion to set a public hearing. And that's what my question to you is that not equivalent to a motion to receive?
So because it's a commission application, I do it very formally so that it's received by the body that's looking at the application. It actually, the clock doesn't start ticking for that applicant until it's actually been deemed received by the commission. So for example, if I receive an application in my land use office and it's been sitting there for 20 days and I don't have a commission meeting, the commission can't really do anything until they have their meeting. So the clock, for the purposes of adhering to statute and making sure that there's plenty of time for the decision-making process, I don't actually consider that application received until it's formally received by the commission, because it's a commission application. So there's agent approval applications and then there's commission applications. Like a zoning permit would be an agent approval that you were not, bound to these certain very formal receipt dates. I would just sign off of it as land use staff. But with commission applications, a receipt date can be really, really important. Is it the day it was received in the land use office? Is it the day it made it to the docket for a meeting?
Comments, Karen?
Yes, because Janelle brought up an interesting issue, because there was one commission in the Western Hills that got into trouble by sending an application back without having a formal process in which it showed that the commission actually received it, put it on the docket, and then chose to deny it. There has to, Janelle, you know what I'm talking about.
I do,
right?
yes.
Yes.
So what do we do? I mean, Karen, how does it work for us?
I know that I cannot take a site plan and arbitrarily send it back without having you as the commission have to accept it. It has to be formally on an agenda. I don't have the authority to just say, well, we're not going to have any discussion.
So in fact, we are doing what Janelle's saying. We're just not calling it that.
So
Should we?
should this be in another agenda item that's always on there? If there's one pending, that we have a formal receipt of those listed?
Good
To
idea.
clarify, you've had very few actual site plan approvals. They've normally been part of a special permit. Think about
Okay.
that.
Just
For the lack
checking.
of activity in Cornwall, a Home Depot site plan, a whatever site plan, the site plan for the restaurant was part of the special permit.
But we do have in our, correct me if I'm remembering wrong, but in our new business regulations, we have a site plan without a special permit.
Correct, that's correct.
So we should probably have that on the agenda if there is one that you have personally been handed, Karen, that's complete, so that we can have it on the agenda to formally receive it. And start the clock after we've, as a board, have a meeting and formally receive it. So that their clock starts. So if there's a change that needs to be made to that site plan for some reason, I'm not saying there probably will be, because Karen's really good at making sure they do a good job. But if there is a change or a reason for us to want to deny it that is legal, that the clock wouldn't start until we've had our meeting and formally
That's
receive it.
correct. Yes.
So we should just make sure that those make it onto the agenda item as an agenda item. right? If we have any.
Yeah, typically, Phil, like what you'll see is the new business agenda item. And understandably, if it's new business, the application materials will get circulated and the commission will have their chance to formally receive it with the, the date of the regularly scheduled meeting.
Yep, okay.
Yeah,
more of a
It's just
procedural thing
discerning,
for us.
like the date of receipt of a physical piece of paper in a land use office is different
Got
than
it.
when it's actually received by the commission, because the commission's the approving body.
Sure,
Right.
okay.
Janelle,
Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bruce. Go ahead.
Janelle, when you said that if we don't follow a regulation, it gets thrown out, what does that mean exactly? That
Well, for example, if a town were to, let's just say hypothetically, not publish a public ad for a public hearing, in knowing that they haven't fulfilled the statutes, which is the guiding principles around which we can conduct land use in the manner that we do in our individual towns across the state, if we're a statutory town, then it's not a fair hearing. So we actually should catch ourselves and say, we didn't properly publicly notice this, or if a time limit runs out, let's just say a 65-day limit runs out and the application hasn't been discussed, it gets automatic approval. So what I mean by that is site plan and special permit procedures, it's not so much always the substance of what's getting evaluated, but the technicalities that can get commissions in trouble. So it's not so much that an applicant contests a decision that's made by the town because they were discussing various merits of the application. It's most often, sadly, a mistake when it comes to these statutes. Like
A judge decided to throw out the decision of the Falls Village Commission on the asphalt plan issue because they failed to comply with that date requirement.
Yeah, that was North Canaan.
North Canaan, sorry.
No, it's fine. Just for
Yeah. So that was the case in which the commission made an important mistake.
and then they can
And-
go ahead and do the asphalt plant?
Oh, yep. Mhm.
Wow,
So,
Okay.
so it overturned the decision of the commission.
wow.
Yeah, so that and I didn't articulate it as well as I could have, but it's just that it's very sad when you see a very small, very technical mistake, something that gets overlooked. We've all done it. Really change the approval process, the intention of the regulations, because someone calls the town out on saying, but this wasn't done properly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's never fun to be on the receiving end of those mistakes. Yeah,
That's
so
why if there's a,
Moving right along, since we've got many pages to go.
thank you, Anna. So again, one more thing about timelines, especially and you'll see a lot of this language gets repeated because it's very similar, site plan to special permit, but the applicant can consent to one or more extensions of time. And that usually behooves an applicant to get approved. So for example, if the commission is reviewing a site plan application, they suggest a modification to make sure that the application complies, but they're running out of time, they can then request to the applicant that there's this extension, and most often applicants will not say no because it will just result in their denial. But that extension cannot exceed 2 65-day periods. And that, again, the 65-day period, statute, very much a statute thing.
If in that time period, they would feel like they're running out of the 65-day, the second 65-day period, they can withdraw and resubmit a new one with no penalty, correct?
I mean, when you say no penalty, I would make them pay again.
Yeah. Do we have
Yeah,
a fee for a site plan requirement?
yeah, it's a commission application.
Okay.
Yeah, I certainly would hope that, I haven't looked at Cornwall's fee schedule, but
What is that, Karen?
Relatively inexpensive is the word.
it's
Yeah.
very true. I'm not gonna say how much it costs.
We do charge though, correct, Karen?
We can charge, yes.
Can.
Can or do.
It normally gets folded in, especially when it's a special permit. There's not
Got it.
an accompanying fee. It's kind of folded in.
It's very generous.
It's
Uh,
because Karen is a
I
big
like that word,
softie. We're
you know.
not money grubbing.
So we start at the top of the next page with, again, green language. So this is totally just coming from discussions that we've had from my own thinking and just based on commission's discussion. So this is a recommendation. This is not a rule. This is a recommendation that staff gets contacted for assistance in determining information that may be required for a site plan application. Karen, I'm very positive, works with applicants all the time. Writing this into the regulations is a thing just to make sure that people know they can contact land use staff to get assistance. It's also, this is new, I think we've had a discussion about this before, recommended that the applicant submit all the required information to land use office 48 hours in advance of a commission meeting. I'm not sure, I think we did, it might have been with different members, but we were talking about what seemed the most appropriate at one point in time. Karen, are you comfortable with 48 hours?
It's really hard for 48 hours before a
Right.
Tuesday night meeting when the last time I'm technically in town hall is Thursday.
Should it be,
62.
I think we should reflect our ZEO's hours over which we as a commission currently don't have any control.
It's frankly, if they bring it in at 11:58 on Thursday, it's not like it gets done on Thursday, it gets done on Saturday. So
yeah.
Yeah, I know. Karen, I don't want to hear about how you keep extending yourself on our behalf, okay?
well, sometimes there's extenuating circumstances.
I know, and that's fine, and you will continue to do it, but it would be better if the general public understood these limitations.
A quick question. I was briefly on the Wetlands Commission when we used to have actually it was asked to have one of the P and Z persons sit on that commission, and they've since done away with that. But I recall that their applications were always in like a week before to give the commission members an actual the ability to go out and do the sites. Is that typical amongst most towns?
Yeah, I've seen that, and it's not always written into the regs. So this is what I wanted to discuss with this group. It doesn't have to be written into the regs, because keep in mind, as things change, if they're in the regulations, it's really, monumented as a rule. I've seen a lot of deadlines on applications. So if there's the application for a site plan, it says on the application, this is required to be in a land use office. In various towns that I'm engaged with, we're doing like a week in advance. A lot of that is staff review, and a lot of that is commission review. So making sure that these applications are circulated and people have time to look at them. And we're cutting applicants off. We're just saying you won't be on the docket for this month, but every town approaches things differently. I really appreciate how Cornwall has always been so friendly and accommodating. So it's really,
I don't think a week ahead of time is difficult. I think, if people want to get something in a chronicle, they're gonna have it done a month ahead of time or more. So
yeah, I mean, keep in mind,
a week for some project that you want to do that's going to take you probably a lot longer than a week to complete is not outrageous, I don't think.
yeah. And just to Phil's point, just keep in mind, so site plans and special permits, they're not the norm. They're the once in a few months cycle applications. So I think we've been meeting since this year. We might have received 1 to 2 commission applications. So I think just sometimes it's okay to have boundaries and standards. these projects are the more complex of the projects that we'll ever see in town. So making sure that there's ample time for staff to digest the application, deem it complete, and then for the commission to review before they have to go to a public hearing is really helpful.
I also think that we should have it in here because I think that if we're clear about the expectations of how long ahead of time they should have it to the office before our meeting, then they have a set timeline. They know that, oh, the commission meeting is on Tuesday, the 10th, then I need to have it in there by May 3rd,
Yeah, yeah.
right? So it's
Just-
a
just-
clear expectation.
James, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I think we ought to just, since it's a suggested, it is also recommended that the applicant submit all required information to the land use office at least 1 week in advance of a commission meeting, because people are always going to push the deadline.
Yeah.
And that way, you know, and it's still a suggestion. So if Karen wants to make an exception, so be it. But at least as a suggestion, it would probably be easier on her and the commission in case it is complicated.
Great.
Yep. Totally
So
agree.
just for the benefit of people who may be trying to catch us out, making a regulatory change in our reformatting project, this is a procedural issue that previously was, the procedure was previously not described at all. And now we're just describing what the commission wants procedurally. Just
Yep.
to be clear on the language one would use in discussing this addition.
Yeah. And again, it's an informative recommendation.
Right. And pardon me
I mean-
for being a bit paranoid.
I honestly wouldn't have a problem saying they shall be received by the office, but we won't have to if we don't want to.
Then they feel like it's legislation. That's my.
I'm
Then
just saying, like, if you want to get it done, then you need to have it done a week ahead of time, and that's the
That's
way it
fair.
is, and then it's not going to be in the next meeting, you know, and the reason, you know,
I mean, Karen can't, it's up to her discretion, and she could say, I'm sorry, it's not going to be at this meeting because we didn't have a chance to review it. It's in here that it should be submitted prior to that.
Yeah,
yeah,
As
I'm fine with it the way it is. Just make it a week.
it's helpful sometimes too as staff if you have something that's written into an official regulation, even if it is protocol, that it's documented somewhere. If someone's really upset with you for not accepting their application, if you can say, you know,
yeah. I mean,
It's like-
the more information, the better
yeah.
about our process. Okay,
Great.
carry on.
Great. So, and then here we get into application requirements. So this is, again, very much just informing one about the process. So application form, fee payment, that's pretty standard. A statement of use, a written statement that describes the proposed use and or structure so the commission can determine compliance with the permitted use provisions and applicable standards of the regulations. Then we get into a site plan, so an actual site plan. And then these details are from the existing regulations with that very the particularities around the scale and the size of the pages. And then what the site plan should include is A through H. And this shall be prepared by a Connecticut registered land surveyor, engineer, architect, and or landscape architect. So really looking that we're not, especially for commission applications, that we're getting a professional site plan prepared.
Can I ask? Okay, I have a comment. You included the words location of refuse containers. Our current regulations don't mention refuse containers. Is that something that's pretty standard it's up at the top right?
Oh, yes, thank you for that. I should actually highlight that in green. It's often overlooked and then thought of in the field, and sometimes it's helpful if it's already on the site plan so that one can understand the overall workings of a site. This is very much more so important when it comes to commercial development.
Yeah. Which we haven't really had very many of. Is there anybody on the commission who's uncomfortable about adding those two words, which are
Thank you.
new?
Thank you for that. And I'll underline that, Anna, the refuse containers.
It's funny, I noticed that too, and I assumed it was for commercial areas or, restaurants and stuff like that. Is there a way to, like, it's not pertaining to like a construction site and construction dumpsters, or is it? Are these permanent or not permanent refuse containers, but
I mean, typically, if it's a site plan, they do oftentimes get into the construction phasing. So if there's a stockpile of materials, if there's dumpsters for the purposes of if they're doing some sort of construction, this is sort of a catch-all. So refuse container, be it permanent or temporary for the construction project, or permanent for just the inner workings of the function of the project and the property.
yeah, I mean, from a construction standpoint, that becomes really challenging, especially because you typically move it around.
Yeah.
Not
Right.
only that, but I guess the contractor may not even be involved at the time the site plan is, they can, figure it out, but to be
Yeah.
locked into a
More so what the site plan is getting at is an understanding of the permanent fixtures that are going on to that lot. And what I've run into oftentimes, we forget things. So I've run into a lot of times people forget the fact a loading zone designation might be really helpful for a restaurant so that there's traffic control. And as a commission, keeping in mind your greater picture is public health, safety, and welfare. So anything in the built environment that can further public health, safety, and welfare, these things get forgotten. Where we're putting our garbage can really affect how your neighbor feels about you.
yeah.
Where you're loading, where you're,
get
and like where you're unloading your vegetables before your morning, flurry of activity at your restaurant with the beeping backup trucks can really change people's perspective. So the location of these are certainly to think of the site comprehensively, so we're not forgetting these things. And I've added definitely loading zones and refuse containers because they've just come up now that we're seeing a little bit more commercial activity. We're not used to looking at these on applications. We're used to looking at, the house, the barn, the shed, and then the logistics of the commercial environment comes into play very quickly.
Is there a way to specify that those are, kind of more permanent descriptions? For example, I know Karen has received complaints about the location of dumpsters and porta potties on construction.
Thank you, Christine.
As
Porta potties is the big
Oh
one.
wow.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
So what I'm concerned is, is there going to be an angry neighbor coming and saying, hey, listen, it's there in the regulations. They're supposed to locate it. I didn't, this wasn't approved. It's in an unapproved location. And all of a sudden we have a big problem.
Yeah, Christine, that gets me thinking, and I know we're not supposed to talk about substantive changes because that's verboten at this point in the game, but a lot of regulations are now starting to have sections on construction provisions, and it's overall, so it's more so that there's particular construction provisions that are adhered to, and I think that might be a really good place when we get there with substantive changes to have overarching provisions keeping in mind construction, because understandably these things we can't really show on a site plan because construction is constantly changing that site. So yeah, I think that's such a good point to see what's cropping up in towns too. I think it's really informing a lot of our thinking around where our regulations how they're currently written sometimes can fall short because we can't think of it all.
Right.
Could we fix this a little bit by saying permanent refuse containers?
Yeah, it's funny.
thinking about this.
I thought of that, but then technically a dumpster is not a permanent refuge.
Yeah, because it's on wheels.
And
Yeah,
that's what all the restaurants use is how, a restaurant will have a dumpster in the back.
So you think that we should hassle people about where they put their dumpsters when they're having a construction project?
No, but if it's a
No.
restaurant, we should. So how do we differentiate
Maybe
between,
you could say residence refuge containers or owner refuge containers, or, specify that they belong to the owner, not the contractor.
Well, except they don't belong to the owner. They belong to the company usually. So
Well, the owner
I think-
rents them.
I think- I think something like continued use dumpsters.
but I think it's implied. I think it's implicit when you're getting a site plan. You're not getting a site plan of a construction site. You're getting a site plan of the project
of the,
that's being
yes,
proposed. So I think we need to keep our thinking at what we want site plans to show, which is the result of a construction project.
Right.
That makes sense.
good.
Could I add something about the dumpsters? If you have a very tight site and they only have 10 parking spaces, and then you go out and they have a permanent dumpster that takes up a parking space and a half, which limits the parking which you approved for the use. And I have seen that happen. It's like, well, nobody asked me. I've got to put it someplace, so it's going to go in a parking space. What's the problem?
Mhm, mhm.
Yep.
In a final site plan, if it's going to take up account for the loss of parking or accessibility or whatever, it should be considered as part of it.
So it really, we should have that provision should be in there.
Okay,
The porta potty is a separate thing because the building official can approve a porta potty without having it go through zoning. Because that's a construction piece that somebody like Paul can say you need to have one out there. Yeah.
Then we
had a
also get
question.
into
Please had a
existing.
question.
Oh, sorry, I missed someone.
Sorry, I muted myself, so I'm talking way over here, but no one
I saw you.
was listening to me.
for you.
It's actually suiting, but anyways, I was gonna suggest maybe scratching accessory structures, because you already have all existing and proposed structures.
Got it. Yeah. Yeah, great. I love that simplicity. I love it.
And then also, location dimensions of all existing landscape. That's kind of a weird thing to, existing landscape. Or,
I'm sorry. What,
What's existing and proposed, right?
landscaping.
James, I just missed your place. What are you in?
D.
13D.
D, great.
Yeah,
Okay.
place for the
Oh, I
business.
see. Yes.
I was parking spaces loading.
Yeah, that's.
So make it
awkward.
landscape features.
Yes, thank
Signs.
you.
Landscape,
Landscape features work,
yeah, or
James? I mean, landscape features could be anything. It could be a stone wall, it could be a plant. It
well,
could
in
be
our
tree.
existing ones, we kind of split it off into a couple different sentences.
Yeah, and I was trying to be as concise as possible, so I see that.
All right, no, that works. We probably just don't need accessory structures in there.
Yeah, I like the verbiage of Phil, the landscape features. And again, landscape features, they're mentioned when they're required as a part of that construction activity. The regulations get into that later. I think around parking and loading and landscaping.
And we could have landscape features as a definition too.
Awesome, great. Okay, then we get into location of existing utility poles and or underground lines. That's just a site thing. Sometimes we get really myopic in our thinking. We forget about things that are in either subterranean or just a part of the overall site function. Then stone walls, fences, and other pertinent roadside features. Again, just back to the concept in statutes around protecting our cultural just features that we see and pertinent roadside features is rather open because, you know, there could be rock outcroppings, there could be significant trees. That's really something that the professional preparing the site plan will know to call attention to if it exists on the site. Then we get
Does
into
it just-
oh, sorry.
Just, sorry, does it? I could see how like it doesn't like the pertinent roadside feature might not necessarily be roadside. I mean, it could be farther back on the property that's not roadside, but it could be a pertinent, like, I don't know, say there was some monument that's been on somebody's piece of property
Yeah,
forever,
no, I see what you're saying.
God.
or some gigantic boulder that was dropped by some glacier that had a name.
Significant site features. Significance a tough word because then if someone doesn't show it and you say, why didn't you show your maple tree? They can say, I don't think it's significant.
Maybe just scratch roadside. and then
Yeah, I like
maybe-
that. Pertinent features.
Yep.
And then it's really up to the commission to ask your questions. If you feel it's pertinent to the site plan, then it's pertinent to the site plan. Okay, then we get into water courses, wetlands, other hydrological features, specifically regulated inland wetlands, flood hazard areas, and identified aquifers. I think it's, again, not to forget those elements. And then sufficient information required to show existing and post-construction surface drainage patterns clearly, especially if grading and excavation will occur during construction. We'll get into that with the E&S plan. But again, to really put all of the elements of what the commission is looking for into one section, instead of being, there's an E&S section later in the regulations that's really pertinent for site plan and special permits. So bringing that forth here. Then we get into, this is pre-existing in the regulations. It gets a little lost on page 75 now, where it says the site plan shall show and calculate total existing and proposed impervious surface on the site. It's a really important one, and I think we forget to do that often. But again, it gives us a really good understanding of the built environment and then the total coverage of the lot that's being proposed. Then we get into, so this is where there's landscaped areas again, and it cites us back to our general provisions where we're discussing landscaping, including trees and shrubs to be remained or to be planted. Again, just to give everyone a comprehensive sense of the site. And that comes from page 27. Sanitation report, that again is updated from page 27. I have updated it just to have language that doesn't tie the regulations to Torrington area health, should that ever change. And also the jurisdiction of the commission is just going to be to look for that certification, not so much discern anything else. Then we get into stormwater management. So stormwater management.
I'm sorry, I need to interrupt you to go back one because our current reg talks about grading and the 2-foot intervals. And you don't mention that anywhere here.
Yeah, that again is updated because as far as sanitation report goes, Anna,
Now I'm talking about our,
the contours.
the C for the, you know, the different elements that have to go into the site plan, not the sanitation report. I'm backing up one.
Yeah, so as we get farther into this section, you'll see contours come into play when we get into erosion and sedimentation.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, sure. It's just trying to, again, fit these pieces together so that we're a little bit more concise, and also so it's recognized why things are being asked for. So it ties back to the regulations. I look at contours as being really integral to erosion and sedimentation.
Got it. There's a really good flow to this.
Okay, Thank you. Stormwater management. So again, this, because it's in a separate section, I think it's forgotten. And it's really important because it all ties into low impact development and the standards of low impact development. There's a relatively long section about low impact development and what it means, but it doesn't get referenced or tied in to existing regulations. And that's where there's a requirement that if the site has more than 20% impervious surface or overall coverage within the Cornwall regulations, that a Connecticut licensed professional engineer submits the stormwater site plan. And again, this submittal includes details of the stormwater control systems into the site plan. This is all a pre-existing regulation. It's just lost on page 75 because it doesn't get tied back.
Right, it's in, currently it's, you know, you have to flip through the pages of the book a long way to find it.
Yeah, and I struggled with realizing when it was applicable. And then when I read the regulations, I realized, okay, this all ties back to impervious surface, which is why asking someone for the impervious coverage would then be a part of the application process. So you knew if it triggered stormwater management plan or not. And similarly with, I think I heard someone's voice.
Yeah, Janelle, do we have a percentage of coverage?
Yes, so it's,
Regulation?
yes. So on the existing regulations, page 75, we get into stormwater management and it's 20%.
Oh, it is 20%, okay.
And I think that's gotten missed because it took me a while to find that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then we get into erosion sedimentation control, again, tied by statute. If a half acre cumulatively is disturbed, an ENS plan is required. That is statute. And the erosion sedimentation control plan must include a map and a narrative. And determining best practices is again referencing Connecticut guidelines for ENS control. It was adopted in 2002, and I've left and as amended because we're hoping that they'll update those sometime soon. This is adapted from page 29, and I think again just tying when an erosion and sedimentation control plan is required back to the regulations, and bringing it a little bit more to the forefront so that we know it's a half acre disturbance. It's actually not that much that requires an ENS plan. Then we have this lovely 0.7. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I got a little lost. Going back to the 20%, and you're referencing page 75 for that, and
Yeah.
my apologies, I'm still looking at my.
No, it's okay. Some of the page numbers are off, James, now I've noticed because we've added that home business regulation. So I want to double check that.
But what I'm seeing, and just to confirm, is I see that same regulation that comes into play for us under non-conforming uses located on Route 7.
Exactly.
Yes, that's it. That's
Is that
exactly
the
it.
only place that regulation comes into play?
Yes.
So then are we now applying that to all our site plan requirements instead of just keeping it along the non-conforming uses located on Route 7?
But that's, I'm very confused as to why it wouldn't be uniform. And only for non-conforming uses.
It probably should be a discussion that we ought to have instead of throwing it in on the whole townwide. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I agree.
I do, and I've just never understood why it would be applicable somewhere where there's non-conformities, but not everywhere else.
So I think it's just because Route 7 is close to the Housatonic River, and way back when we were using that as kind of a Housatonic River overlay zone. So then we were saying, since that's such a sensitive water area, we were applying those extra restrictions to just that part of town.
I agree with Janelle that it ought to be part of our regulations covering the entire town, but I also agree with James that this is a change we should postpone
This is
for a
tricky one.
regulatory amendment at some point in the future. It has very significant consequences
Yeah,
for the homeowner.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but it has more significant for smaller lots, i.e. Cornwall Village, because 20% of a 3-acre lot would be an awful lot of impervious surface.
yeah.
Yeah.
But
Well,
even,
it's
I
not
would say-
that likely to
Yeah.
happen.
even a 1 acre lot, you're still looking at like 8,800 square feet.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a fair, I mean,
That's a lot of
20%,
parking lot.
yeah, 20% is pretty healthy.
It's big.
Yeah.
But anyways, it's not, it's currently under a very small sliver, non-conforming uses located on Route 7.
That whole section,
I want to remind everybody that Cornwall used to have an industrial zone along Route 7. I have no idea how old this particular section of our regulations is. But Karen, do you have any idea? Were you involved in writing it? Did we lose Karen?
Oh, no, I'm here.
Nodding her head.
That was before,
That was before my time.
that
Yeah,
was before.
I bet this came in at the time that all the stuff about the industrial zone on Route 7.
Yeah, this was probably when my dad was on.
And that industrial zone was present for a certain period of time, and then the town voted to abolish it.
got it.
And
That's-
it just goes to show how poor we've all been at actually reading and understanding our own regulations, that we didn't catch that bizarreness, the bizarre nature of this little section in the past.
Well, so then the stormwater management plan section is only for this one, that very narrow situation and isn't applicable anywhere else?
I find that hard to believe.
I have yet to connect the dots though, because, and I'm very thankful, James, for you bringing up that point, because I've really struggled to understand stormwater management goes on and on about low impact development practices. And if it's only applicable in one very narrow circumstance, I'm confused as to when and why the stormwater management section
Well-
became so robust.
My guess is if you look at the existing, the stuff that's built existing, if you look around Cornwall Bridge, the village of Cornwall Bridge, that's the only place in town really that there's a lot of pavement on smaller lots. And I could see how that was put in there at some point when somebody was talking about, I don't know, paving Northwest Lumber or building the lumber yard and paving all of it and not having necessarily a storm, they were
All right,
concerned
well,
about stormwater. I'm
let's,
just thinking historically of what's built where.
yeah, I don't think we should waste too much time guessing how this came about.
Yeah, no.
Let's,
Agreed.
but
If I,
let's
if
make,
I
I'm
may,
making a note. It's gonna probably be something that we will consider pretty soon in the future.
if I may add something, though, it's very interesting when we take the tie to inland wetlands. Most inland wetlands applications, even for single family residents, are coming in with an ENS control plan.
Yeah,
That's part of the engineer's septic design, because Torrington Area Health asks for information as to erosion sedimentation controls for the installation of septic systems. Wetlands asks for it. So I see it often without having to ask for it on zoning permits.
yeah.
And it is required by wetlands, even under their permits as of right, that's a provision that has to be supplied.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's, I don't notice that it's missing because I see it even when it's not asked for in other places. So it would be a good idea to firm it up and make it
Clearer.
more apparent in zoning where it probably should be, yes.
I
in
mean-
zoning regs.
If we do go through on page 74 on my regs, I don't know, this might be off by a page number, but
Yeah,
that Article 15, non-conforming lot structures and uses, statement of intent, it does describe where these are coming from and why along Route 7 in Cornwall.
yeah, I see that and I have that and I'm aware of that. I'm very concerned about that being in line with the legality of nonconformities, because the statutes are really clear on not allowing expansions of nonconformities. The goal around regulations is to get non-conforming structures, lots, et cetera, into compliance. So having provisions for expansion of non-conforming uses, et cetera, is definitely a conflict that I've highlighted.
Yeah, I think, but we probably can't take these regulations that are in here and then go and back apply them to the rest of the town. without-
No, agreed. But I think for long-term homework for the commission to really start thinking, when does stormwater management come into play? What is that impervious coverage? That threshold uniformly across town.
Yeah.
Or-
I just took a quick look at the 1985 regulations. They exempted all single-family homes on lots from that provision specifically.
Yeah, I've seen that too. Yeah.
So anyway, good pickup.
Really good pickup.
Yeah,
Yeah, and really good, I think, for all of us. There are things in the regulations. I'm not gonna pretend I know what they mean and why they say what they say. Don't always
Well,
know that.
don't ask us.
Yeah.
Then we get into the caveat, other information, just put that there. If the commission needs to reserve the right to require additional information. Again, it happens. Sometimes we can't catch everything. Site plan,
Wait, don't move on.
okay,
This is one area where I had a question because our current regs allow the commissioners to decide that certain things could be omitted from a site plan if we think that they're not necessary.
yeah, so you'll see, Anna, in the beginning, unless determined as not applicable by the Planning and Zoning Commission and or the CEO.
Oh,
And
thank you. Okay.
I've put that first and foremost, just so an applicant reading this doesn't freak out and think I have to give them all of this and they actually can check it off, but it also gives the authority to the zoning agent.
Very good.
Great.
I just want to be clear what we decided to do with 0.5, the stormwater management.
Get it out of
Taking
there.
it out.
Okay,
Getting it out of
I
there.
just wanted to make sure that we were all clear on. what we
Yeah,
were
getting
doing.
it out of there, and then we're gonna have to
We'll
dissect that
revisit.
non-conforming chapter when we get to it. And then it's a broader discussion when substantive changes, what will
Okay.
trigger stormwater management.
Got it.
Yeah. So then ENS, and then other information, and then we get into approval criteria. So again, this is not in the regulations. So I don't know when you get a site plan, what is being applied to evaluate the site plan, other than conformity with the regulations. But just pulling this from having practiced site plan approval and review and looking at some other examples, just in reviewing and approving any proposed site plan, the Planning and Zoning Commission determines the public's health, welfare, and safety have been protected and the following criteria are met. So again, required or necessary information has been provided by the applicant, so compliance can be determined. The proposal complies with other applicable sections of zoning, bringing back dimensional requirements, permitted uses, overlay provisions, parking and signs. Eventually it'll be nice because we can hyperlink these to the other sections, and any special requirements applying to the subject use. Then we get into all other applicable local, state, federal requirements, including subdivision approval, necessary permits from inland wetlands, and then just citing that statute around inland wetlands again. Getting back to access to the property, internal circulation and egress from the property are safe and suitable. and have been designed to minimize hazards and congestion. Adequate provisions have been made to address handicap accessibility. So again, ingress, egress, access to the site, parking, loading, signs, impervious surface, stormwater management. We're going to want to get rid of stormwater management. And site grading has been designed to prevent degradation of the natural environment. And then the proposal adequately addresses, rather than addressed, adequately addresses potential public nuisances such as noise, glare from lighting, and other neighborhood impacts such as traffic.
This is an example of a whole bunch of new language where I've made a note that the language is new, but this is completely compatible with our old regulations and expresses the intent of our own regulations. Furthermore, when we did our new home business regulations, Janelle introduced us to the idea that we need approval criteria. And I think it's standard in land use law and land use regulations to have approval criteria. Now, when we want to move to approve the site plan, all we have to do is say it meets all the requirements of 6.4. That's all I have to say about that.
Great.
And a quick question. I love all that. And in your experience, do you think in case we ever had a situation that we did deny a site plan for one of these reasons, that we would be okay from a court perspective?
Yes, and I would certainly, what I actually do is I bring my approval criteria with me when I evaluate an application, if I'm doing it on behalf of a commission, and I literally am checking the box. Like 1, satisfied, complies with every other applicable provision, and I jot them all down, and then I cite them. Though I get into wetlands and I cite them. If the commission comes across a very clear thing in their regulations that just shows they didn't comply, it's very evident. You denied them on the basis of the access to the site, or denied them on the basis that their impervious surface was beyond.
I mean, I kind of like it because everybody's got the same rule book now, so including the applicant.
It's really prescriptive. It's sort of foolproof in that way, where if you check all these boxes as an applicant or as a commissioner, there's no grounds for denial. So as an applicant, you can know, okay, I've satisfied what they're looking for. And then as a commissioner, you can vote on an application with confidence that you've gone through the approval criteria and that application has either satisfied it or it hasn't.
Perfect.
So the only fuzzy part, the only time it gets fuzzy is in number 6, right? When it's
Yeah.
adequate,
Mm-hmm,
right? What is adequate?
mm-hmm. And
Well, that's the beauty of number 6.
No, I'm good with it. I didn't say, yeah, I'm good with it, but I mean, the rest of it is a very nice checklist. The last one is a little more
That's-
subjective.
Well, that's where the people who are liable to want to complain about noise,
No, I
that's
get
where
it.
we fit them in. You know, that's where we worry about what they're thinking when we look at a site.
And then we decide if we've talked long enough about it and heard enough opinions and say it's been adequate.
One other question, if I may, you say adequate provisions to address handicap accessibility. Should that not include comma if required by law? I mean, handicapped accessibility is required for businesses. Do not have a regulation saying that we require it for every home that's built, but we're talking about site plans now.
Yeah, we are. Oftentimes the site plan is expected to have visitors, but required by law, certainly. I can even grab the Connecticut General Statute that gets into that.
I just don't want
Or if
general
appropriate.
public to think that, oh my God, you know, I'm building a new house and I have to make it handicap accessible and I'm 35 years old.
Of course, yeah. No, I totally get that. I think if required by law, it would be great, Anna. The one thing is oftentimes this can get overlooked, and then you run into it when the building official is looking for the proper turnaround and the site plan doesn't coincide. I think just bringing it into the foray so people are aware that there are.
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Okay.
I like that, if required by law. Okay, site conditions of approval, bonding, this comes from the pre-existing regulations. Again, verbatim, other than the fact that I brought in the statute that can actually give the commission a right to pull a bond or ask for a bond. And then the formula, the 10% of the cost, this is all within the existing regulations, not allowing a zoning permit to be issued for the project until a bond is received. I take it the commission doesn't often authorize or.
I have never participated in a decision to require a bond. Karen,
Okay.
have you?
Yes, it's been all wetlands.
Oh,
Yeah, it's been required under wetlands when there's been massive down like at Furnace Brook, when there was the having to restore the bank, things like that. We had bonds pulled, but it never came to planning and zoning.
Great.
It was always wetlands, yeah.
Yeah, it tends to be bigger project type of things, but, or for ENS control, if there is a tricky site with steep slopes, pull a bond on ENS control to make sure that gets done.
Yep, that's on the Popple Swamp Road Dam, again, wetlands, yeah.
Cool. And then we get into modifications. So again, this is all site plan. Modifications are again, not a condition, but just a change to the plan. So sometimes in the field, things change. And if changes to an approved plan must be made, that has to go to inland wetlands if it went, but also getting into if there's a modification of approved site plans to be reviewed by the commission as a modification. So sometimes we see this, things change in the field, you hit ledge during construction, you have to move something, etc. Just making sure that those changes are recorded on the land record and also reported to the commission being the body that originally approved the site plan application. Then this also gives the authority for minor changes of approved site plans to go between a conversation of the chair of the commission and the zoning agent so that they can make changes. If it's something that's minimal, bringing something back before the commission isn't always appropriate and isn't always timely. Things can happen in the field really quickly where changes need to be made. And if it's something that the zoning agent in conversation with the chair agree upon to be made and filed on the land records, again, that doesn't affect the overall layout, design, or nature of the project, allowing that to happen. So that's just a new thing baked in. A lot of times modifications don't really get discussed in regulations and in practice in the field, they happen often.
we participated in a discussion of a modification to a special permit. It was the fence on Pine
Yes.
Street.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
Well, I'm going to point out the fact that I brought it up tonight on special permit 250 for the restaurant. There was no handicapped ramp. And when I went down to the certificate of zoning compliance, there is a handicapped ramp. I called the building official and he said by law, by his provisions, the
Yes.
handicapped accessible ramp, which he doesn't consider a structure in some fashion, is an inherent part of what is needed for a building. So that was added into the site plan. I made Jimmy Terrell, we signed off on it to acknowledge the fact that there was at least a conversation about it and that I had checked with the building official to begin with, and it was appropriate. Yeah.
Okay,
So then we get back to the zoning permit, again, can't be issued for use requiring site plan approval. And I pop this in here, and if you don't want it in here, you can get it away. But until the chair of planning and zoning has signed the final approved plans, it's really helpful for record keeping to know that the final approved plan is indeed the final approved plan. I can't tell you how many times I've gone through land use records and had many iterations of plans, not knowing what plan to bring with me out into the field. So to make sure that there's one final copy of the plan on land records that's been blessed by the chair as being what the commission approved, and that they are just filed in that manner. Again, up to all of you. It has helped me in the past knowing which record is the one that's been commission approved, but always up to you.
What way do you currently have for ensuring that you know, Karen? Because we've never had our chair sign off on plans before.
We haven't had that many site plans filed on the land records.
Uh-huh.
You're not filing a site plan for a single family home. You're not filing a site plan for an accessory apartment. The site plan is, especially if it's within, within a structure, you're not going to.
Well, what are the uses that would require only a site plan and not a special permit?
We're getting into that next week or next month with our
Well,
youth
I mean,
chapter.
I don't care if the chair should sign off on those things. I don't want to, I don't know that we actually need to change.
There's been very few incidences, but
Right.
we can be hopeful that there is going to be more reason for site plans because there's going to be more development that's commercial and supporting economic development.
All right.
Just for a clarification for myself and the commission, so we're saying, I mean, obviously when anything comes before Karen, it usually has a site plan associated with it. If we're gonna pull a permit for a driveway, then we're gonna have a site plan. And as I understand it, typically those things are minor enough that Karen signs off on them directly and they don't come before the commission, right? And
Right.
in this case, we're talking about a site plan that's more involved, that should come in front of the entire commission, in which case then it's not quite a special permit, but we want everybody on the same page. So that's where you're suggesting that we have the chair sign off on that. Is that where this is going?
Yeah, it closes the loop of the approval process.
And that's a commission approved process as opposed to just a ZEO approved process.
Yeah.
Correct.
A site plan that has to be put on the land records is a Mylar, is not a formal site plan that's filed with the land records in Vera's office is a specially prepared plan with signatures and what have you. Yeah.
And then Karen, you would be the person that would be at the discretion whether you're going to bring it before the commission as a whole, as opposed to just signing off on it when you're super comfortable with it, as you always have in the past, right? So you're the person, the lion at the gate saying, let's either bring this forward or everything's cool.
And it's very interesting. Over the years, it became a real issue in New Hartford when you had a development that was had multi-level of pages, and the regulations only implied that you had to file the overall site plan as opposed to the levels like the E&S controls, site development, et cetera, et cetera. And we started requiring the entire set of maps to be filed so that there was no question as details got changed in the field what was originally planned, because it could have cost $120 to file a site plan if there was 10 sheets to it, 10 or 12 sheets to it. Yeah. But it worked. It worked in the case of things, big developments, for instance, Home Depot, et cetera, and big subdivisions, that all of the sheets for the overall site development be on file, contours of roads, et cetera. Yeah. But we haven't had
Being
many of
on
those.
file as opposed to sitting in your file cabinet. What do you mean by on file?
And
Actually filed in
the land-
as a map in
So
the
the-
vault as
So
a
the public can
Mylar.
access it.
Mhm.
Okay,
Because a formal site plan in some fashion that's tied to a development that's multi-tiered, there should be a record, and it's not an onerous cost for those maps to be on file so that things, as Janelle is saying, that you know which one the commission looked at in a certain meeting and approved before modifications are made.
Fine, the chair will sign off on this.
So is this, so is this every site plan?
No,
Just ones that require approval?
Commission approval.
Commission,
Yeah.
okay.
Because if you think about it at this point forward, so the commission is in charge of all the approvals, and then the baton gets passed to land use staff to then make sure that the site plan is seen through and is developed out in the field in the manner in which it's been proposed. So then the baton is now passed to land use staff to follow up site visits, make sure, comply, go out in the field, and then issue a cert of compliance.
Where, but so what I'm confused about when I read this paragraph, and maybe I'm just missing it from previous, but where does it say if commission approval is required?
The site plan and special permit requirements are always going to be
Okay,
commission applications
Well,
in the
Yeah.
formal sense, using the formal sense of what a site plan is. And I think that might be clearer once we get through uses. When we discuss that next meeting, because you'll see what uses require a site plan.
Mhm.
Can you
as the
give us an
regular-
example that we can relate to, Janelle?
Yeah, and let me grab that particular section of the regulations, because I actually have the other pages before me. There aren't many. Let me grab that. I
No,
mean,
we haven't received that yet.
no, uses, because at this juncture, we're not making substantive changes to regulations. So currently, site plan within the existing regulations would be a minor home business. And then we also have, so nowhere in residential zones are site plans applicable. Special permits are, and then, yeah, we rarely use site plan.
That's why we're so confused.
Yes, literally rarely.
I want to back up again because I think we got to call them, we rarely use commission site plans. We always use site plans, like, Karen probably sees them with every application that she gets. So on the back of our agenda every month, we have a list of the activities that Karen saw, and they all involve a site plan. Is that correct, Karen? Pretty much?
Well, some sort of a plan. If it's a simple zoning permit, is it a huge site plan if it's a shed?
Yeah,
No,
it might
but
be a
it
plot plan.
clearly has to be on the zoning permit and some sort of a map. And in many cases, a formal map in which there is clear delineation of where this is going, how it reacts to wetlands. But in terms of other site plans, and I can tell you that a lot of them were, a lot of site plan approvals were done without formal paperwork even put in the land use files, because it became an issue down at the bank when there was no clear delineation of the various businesses at the bank and where they parked vehicles and what,
Sorry.
and just,
Do
multi-use, yeah.
you call other things that, is there a lesser description for the site plans you're talking about? In other
Yes.
words,
A plot plan.
And
A plot plan.
I've been wanting to bring that up because our old regulations use the words plot plan, but they don't tell us what needs to go in it.
Mhm,
And we have not included a plot plan in our definitions.
mhm.
Well, a plot plan, I normally try to work with people to find the highest and best information that we have on any piece of property so that anything moving forward clarifies what was there and what is going to be there. So we do look for maps. I do go back into old files and try to find information which isn't readily available, and then bring that forward to identify where structures might be. Do I require them to bring out a surveyor and have a formal site plan that shows to the inch where everything is? No. But, you know, I think as Anna and I have kind of talked, is to try and make the land use files act as true land use files, and that you begin to get an idea of how the site was developed, how things happened, why things are there, and where to look for what is there that shouldn't be there, you know,
Well,
and how it got approved.
let me give an example. When I asked for a permit for my chicken shed, my storage shed, I gave you a drawing that I made myself
Mhm.
with some distances and some
Yeah.
sizes, and it showed the driveway. Was that a plot plan?
That's a plot plan, but when you have something that says, you're 500 feet or more from a property line, you know, you have big acreage in 95% of Cornwall. A plot plan on a 10-acre lot is saying that there's something in the middle of a 10-acre lot, as opposed to having a survey. Yeah.
So, but this is not codified anywhere. Is that correct? It's kind of up to your judgment.
So in opportunity, well, in administration and enforcement is where some of this comes to play. Some of this, I know as-built get mentioned there towards the end of the regulations as written. But again, not codified in any way.
I just have an interesting, so I pulled a driveway permit a year and a half ago or whatever. And with the Board of Selectmen, you pull the driveway permit and they've got a map, or I had to make a map, and right at the top it says site plan. So I drew my site plan, but also there's also with Karen, I had to file a plot plan for the same driveway. So that's why I'm getting confused when we're talking about site plans.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't, you know, when most people come before Karen to say, I want to put in my chicken coop, and she's going to say, yeah, and I'll need a site plan, but it's not a formal site plan as I understand it then. It's just basically a plot plan.
On the back of the zoning permit, it says that you can have a plot plan but again, going back to try and, if I get a zoning permit for instance, a home-based business, and they just say, well, I'm going to have my 3 vehicles, whatever, in the middle of a undefined lot, I think I have the right to ask for more information when, you know, it doesn't give appropriate distances or parking and things like that. There's always the right to ask for more information before even a zoning permit is signed off on.
So theoretically, everyone should be submitting a formal site plan. No, I'm not, that's
Plot
not
plan.
a plot plan. I think we need to add plot plan to our definitions, don't you?
Yes, and
And probably
again,
start using it appropriately.
yeah. 'Cause- And I think just for the commission's understanding, so site plan, think of it as capital S, capital P. Very, very much like a formal approval process. The regulations do not provide many opportunities for site plan approvals. The regulations are very heavily oriented around the special permit. So we spent a lot of our time discussing an approval process that will be applicable very rarely.
So let's move on to special permits then.
Hey,
Okay.
I have to remind you, do we have to discuss a narrative for the June meeting?
Yep.
The opt-out, the narrative that is going to be presented as part of the public hearing for the opt-out
The
in
2
June?
narratives that are included in the folder now, one from Janelle and one from me.
Yes.
We
That's
should
it.
probably do that. some
But,
point.
but we'll do that at the end of our planning workshop. Carry
Okay,
on.
I just wanted to make sure that it didn't get forgotten because I didn't completely address it on the agenda. Yeah.
Okay.
So just so I can say, it's almost 9 now. I'm just wondering how long we want to discuss that at the end.
You know,
Not very long, not very long, but
That's
we
fine,
are,
I'm just throwing it out
stop
there.
talking and move on. Special
Yeah,
permit.
no, I appreciate that, Phil, because I I am fading, but I'll try to remain as articulate and engaged as possible. So now we get,
I think we're only in for 2.5 hours, so I think we have to be out of here by 9:30, so.
yeah,
Fine.
so moving right along, special permit, much more applicable in town. The site plan has informed a lot of what we'll see in the special permit section, so adapted from page 32, again, adapted being the intent is there, but some word changes have been made to recognize that certain uses that would be appropriate in the town of Cornwall, if controlled as to an area, location, or relation to the neighborhood to promote public health, safety, and general welfare, as provided for in Article 7, which is going to be the uses. Such uses shall be treated as special permit uses. Article 7 will be what we discuss next time. The following procedures, standards, conditions set forth or referenced herein are applicable to these specific uses. All such uses are considered to have special characteristics, and accordingly, each application must be carefully reviewed on a case-by-case basis. Again, adapted from the current regulations on page 32. Special permit procedure. So prior to issuance of zoning permit, much like we've seen, special permit approval, application with accompanying information submitted to P&Z for review. I will update the recommendation of 48 hours to be a week prior. And then also there's the caveat here that the commission can refer the plan to local staff members, including local area health district, Conservation Commission, Public Works Department, other local, state, or federal agencies. That's pretty standard. In some cases, the Housatonic River Commission might need to get involved and be advisory to an application. Again, very much like site plan, application form, payment, statement of use, describing the proposed use, and then the site plan. And we reference back in accordance with 6.3.3, which is what we just looked at. And that includes A through H. I will update A through H to get rid of the awkward landscape term and make sure that we tie up all of the suggestions that were previously made this evening. Then we get into sanitation report. Again, not so much our jurisdiction, but a check that we need to make sure that we have succeeded before we're going ahead and approving anything. We need to make sure that there's adequate proposed existing water and sewage facilities. Again, very much what we've seen. A lot of this language is verbatim what we have just seen with IWA, inland wetlands getting involved. I will omit this from stormwater. This is a larger discussion for the commission to have at another juncture. Erosion sedimentation control, very straightforward if disturbance is exceeding a ½ acre cumulatively. And then we get into public hearings. So again, a public hearing is required for a special permit. Planning and Zoning Commission must conduct a public hearing on all special permit applications, and the hearing must be held in accordance with Connecticut General Statutes, Section 8-7D. And that involves everything with noticing of the hearing at the intervals that are prescribed in the statutes. And then also, I do throw out how no new information shall be received from the applicant or the public after the close of the public hearing. That's really important. And again, decisions on these matters shall be rendered within 65 days after completion of the hearing, unless the applicant has consented to an extension, provided the extension shall be no longer than 65 days. We get into notice to abutters. And I've pulled this from the regulations. It's really helpful to have it all in one place so that all of the notice requirements are understood from the application process. Notice to neighboring municipalities is a requirement in statute. If the proposed development is within 500 feet boundary of the adjoining municipality, and then would cause significant traffic and also significant sewer or water drainage. All of this is verbatim from statute at what requires a special permit to be notified to a neighboring municipality. Then we get into special permit approval criteria.
Can I
Again,
just throw out one thing?
yep,
You
please.
probably want to make that 6.8
Thank you.
because we don't have a 6.8. You go from 6.7 to 6.9.
Okay, I will definitely make note. Thank you for that.
You'll have,
Great.
sorry.
No, that's great. Okay, then notice to neighboring municipalities, that's very much statutorily required. And then we get into special permit approval criteria, which should be 6.8, and then so on and so forth, 6.9. So for special permit applications, the commission shall take into consideration protection of public health, safety, welfare, and property values, and that the following approval criteria have been met. We get into all the information has been provided, the proposed use is compatible with the POCD, location and size of the proposed use and the nature of the intensity is in harmony with the orderly development of town and compatibility with other existing uses. Proper consideration has been given to the environmental quality of the proposal, including landscaping and proper use of the site's natural features, the kind, size, location, and height of structures, and the nature and extent of the site work, and the nature and intensity of the use shall not hinder or discourage the use of neighboring properties or diminish the value thereof. All applicable standards shall be incorporated into the plans. This is adapted from page 33 to 34. And I just want to throw out to the commission that protection of property values has very recently, as part of Public Act 2129, the Zoning Enabling Act has actually gone away. And it's imperative that we think about whether or not we want to carry this over into the regulations now, because that has been something that Public Act 2129 has looked at, making sure that our zoning regulations don't discuss value, because that's really not our jurisdiction. Just a point of information.
I agree with that. I
yeah.
agree with that.
The statute, that again, so Public Act 2129, Zoning Enabling Act, giving us the parameters in which we are allowed to, govern our town's land use, and they struck through value because we're not involved with property value.
Property values are completely subjective.
Totally.
They change. We have no control over what's
We have
currently
no-
popular. It should not be a concern of ours.
Well,
Fantastic.
if it's not in the statutes anymore, are you suggesting we take it out now as part of our rework in terms of the statutes compliance?
Yeah, a part of the rework, just to remind everyone, is definitely compliance with our statutory language, keeping in mind the new statutes. Public Act 2129 was a big change for just the parameters in which our regulations can govern our thinking and our approvals.
Is
And
there
we-
anything from health, safety, and welfare?
No, that's the police powers. So the police powers are inherent in why planning and zoning was enabled.
I'm just wondering the definition of welfare, if that has an inherent value associated with that definition, do you think, or maybe not?
That's a police power that's very much promulgated in legislation around what P&Z commissions and regulations do.
So also with the diminish the value of thereof,
Yeah,
discourage the use of neighboring properties seems pretty.
I mean, it's not really up to a property owner to decide whether or not they're discouraging or encouraging. What matters is what's happening within the confines, and that it complies with the regulations, that it furthers the POCD, and that it doesn't diminish others' health, safety, and welfare.
So then if we get rid of it, we don't have to do a public hearing. Is that correct or no?
Oh, no, we still have to do a public hearing.
All special permits require a public hearing.
So then if we're gonna get rid of it, that's gotta go in front of the public. Correct?
Oh, every change, so all of these changes, it's a public hearing no matter what, any change.
I thought the restructuring wasn't. If we're just moving stuff around, I thought that was fine.
That's still gotta,
Yeah, Steve, even if if I wish to add a period because there wasn't one, that
Fair enough.
would need a public hearing.
Okay.
Yeah, text amendments, map amendments, formal public hearing process. Whether it's a commission petition change or whether it's a outside person petitioning that change. But yeah,
Have we made a decision on the use of the two words property values, which are currently included in our general standards for special permits and listed right after health, safety, and welfare? And property values then are not part of the police powers that you are referring to. Is that accurate?
correct.
I think we should cross that out.
Yeah, great. I'm doing that on my notes here at home.
Does anybody object to that?
The whole
No.
town might object to it, but what are we gonna do about it?
Yeah, well, I think it's a very, you try to find a definition for property value that uses physical criteria or standards. It's kind of like rural character, James. It's got that same poorly defined qualitative feel to it that kind of
Well-
goes against the grain of everything else in our regulations, which is
Yeah, but-
concrete.
So does welfare. That's where I was coming from with that. I mean, what
Yeah.
do you mean by
That's-
that?
But
mean-
that's an existing term from the inception of zoning. It was always
That-
health, safety, and welfare.
I'm all for it, but it's just like, they're okay with that term, but they don't, So
Some
that's,
people
I am
could
ju-
argue
I-
that maintenance of their property values is necessary for their welfare. So
That's-
we can still, get into that discussion.
that's what I was trying to hint at before, saying, isn't it kind of inherent?
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
I'm not
All
the
of these zoning-
legislator, I'm just the messenger.
Don't shoot
I'm
the
gonna ask
messenger.
my lawsuit son about health, welfare, and whatever it is,
I mean,
safety.
isn't,
But
isn't
It's
pretty
gonna be
much,
very, it's part of
everything
the
we're-
narrative for,
I would
affordable.
love to just stick on task, just provided our time. I'm
Yes,
absolutely kidding.
Okay, you're doing a great job. We're almost finished. We've got 2 more pages. We've got all these approval criteria that, it's again saying it's the same as our general standards from before, and it's compatible with the precedents that you've set with our business regs and the site plan approval criteria.
Fantastic. So then we get into conditions of approval, and I think this is really important to note. If conditions are not defined within the regulations, thrown out as an option, then the commission shouldn't be conditioning special permits just based upon what went down that night and what someone said about their concerns around a special permit.
Oh, dear.
The regulations themselves must provide for that conditioning. And many
Okay.
regulations, from what many of us see, don't actually get into how special permits can be conditioned. And speaking with many really helpful land use lawyers, they advise me make sure that anything that might come into the conditioning realm gets thrown into the regulations. But if it isn't enabled by the regulations, you can't just randomly require an applicant to screen something, or to limit their hours, or to require a periodic renewal, or to limit their number of occupants, or to regulate the number design of access ways. So having all of these options in there, not saying they'll all be applied at one time, not saying they will ever be applied, but enabling them in the event that they need to be applied, that there is regulatory language in there that enables them. So that's why there's such a smattering of opportunity when it comes to these conditions. It allows for screening and buffering. It allows for limitations of terms of hours and operations, allows for periodic renewal, allows for limitations of size, occupants, extent of the facilities, and then can regulate your number, your design, location of access ways, other site plan features, and then regulate your number, your type, location of lighting, signage, parking. Again, requirements for environmental testing. So sometimes an application comes forth with some unknowns around various things, be it noise, be it air quality, be it surface water quality. So this actually gives the commission the authority to condition a project to provide for such testing. And then there's this catch-all, any data plans or drawings, including architect or engineer's drawings to further support the application. So in the event that the commission needs to condition an application on some particular aspect, there is the opportunity to do so, but that it has been very clearly enabled within the substance of the regulations.
Are we under any obligation to explain why we're putting the conditions in place or referring the fact of the condition back to our special permit approval criteria in any way?
I mean, it'd be probably very helpful if there's some logic behind it. So, screening for a particular reason. Again, if there are conditions coming into play, as a commission, I would just make sure that there's consistency across the board. So if a similar application comes before you, let's just say a home business, for example, special permit application. If there's a home business and it's pretty typical to another home business that you also see, and you condition that, you're conditioning them in the same manner. So they're not conditioned differently because of the actors at play, the neighbors that are talking,
Right.
etc. So that the commission is consistently applying conditions that are logical to the site improvements that are being applied on that land. So if there's landscaping materials and you're requiring a buffering of some fencing because that's what you wish to do as a commission, the next time you see an application with landscaping materials, that buffering is also pulled into play. And if it isn't, that can lead some, if they were, again, all ifs, to ever contest what the commission is up to, and they show that at one point they were arbitrary and or capricious, it's just helpful to be consistent.
Excuse me.
Thank
Janelle.
Yeah.
I'm all for it, but were these, let's see, A through whatever, H at least, is that stuff that you basically, or is that from our regs?
No, this is all green. So the green
It's all
text
green,
is
right?
all something that your regs do not get into conditioning.
I
One bit.
realize that, but I
But
don't,
we do apply conditions and have.
I'm
Yes,
just saying, considering it's after whatever time it is, and this is pretty meaty stuff. I don't think I have the actual wherewithal to go through a change like this if we're gonna put this in our regs moving forward.
so
Because I'm probably good with everything, but maybe we're missing some things that should be in there, and it
Right.
probably warrants a more thorough discussion if this is our new special permit regs.
All right, well, let's come back to this at our next planning workshop then. We'll set this aside for now.
just one thing I'd like to add. So just for everyone, so we can, as we're moving, so these are very important regulations, very important for everyone. I really ask everyone to read them before the meeting and then also come with questions so we can get through these items. Use chapter is going to be a big one too. So definitely compare and contrast with the regulations. Use is going to be much more straightforward. Tabling this until next meeting, I think, is really thoughtful, provided we're all pretty tired. But definitely, if everyone can just read things prior to the meeting and come with questions, I think it will help all of us in the long run.
Very good. We're gonna postpone 6.10. And then we have the final page, which is basically all the same legal languages in site plan. Can you go over that for us?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'm glad that you're, okay, so 6.10 is being tabled. Bonding, complete pullover from page 34, also exactly the same as this was seen with site plan approval. Doesn't seem like it's applied very often. It can be applied, so it's important to note. Notice of decision, that's statutory. I've pulled it into the regs just so everyone's all on the same page about notices of decision and publicizing them. Again, statutory, and then also recording them onto the land records. So that's adapted from page 38. And then modifications, again, getting into things do change in the field. This is new, providing for the instance that the built environment and the existing site conditions are a little bit different than what the plan states. Making sure that there is a little bit of flexibility around these minor changes so that the ZEO and or the chair can make them, discuss it, make sure it gets reported to the commission, and then making sure that these changes are also reported so that all the plans on land records coincide and also reflect what's been approved. Then we get,
That is, just to back up on one, sorry.
no, it's great.
Those 2 paragraphs are new, they're in green, but they reflect how we have actually behaved in the past. Karen will bring these issues to us and we discuss the modifications and we, trust that she knows that we're allowed to do this. So now we're just writing it down. We're not changing our regulations.
Thanks for that clarity, Anna. Then we get into sort of compliance. So this was never really brought into site plan and special permit, but certs of compliance should be issued when all the elements of the approved plan are incorporated as evidence and improved during site visits conducted by the ZEO. This is also important that the ZEO can request a record drawing or an as-built to verify compliance. Just putting that in language somewhere is important. There are times when they're really truly needed to verify compliance. And then if an applicant fails to satisfy conditions of a special permit, its approval may be revoked by the commission and or its authorized agent. I think it's important to know special permits can be revoked. And then of course, expiration. So there is expiration dates tacked onto them. It's typically 1 year unless an extension is granted and is in writing.
Please add certificate of compliance to our definitions.
Great.
So people understand the difference between that and a zoning
CO.
permit and a special permit.
Yeah, excellent. Noted.
Couple minor typos. You need a space after on the bonding paragraph between the .1 and the on the left-hand side of the page, halfway down.
Got it.
Oh, you're so cute. 1 period,
And
1
then
dot space, the applicant.
613.
I'm going to do just like a layout review along with like the numbers and those sorts of things,
Sure,
because as
sure.
these things change, just for everyone's understanding, like any of the lines and returns and those sorts of things, because it's a working document right now, that full exercise has not taken place.
I'd add A in there as 613 approved.
We are almost out of time for recording, so you've got to get to your narrative.
Yeah,
soon.
all right. So
Thank you,
our
guys.
next meeting is June 12th. Have I got that date right? I'm pretty sure that's right. Somebody check their
Oh.
phone.
I'm looking.
I'm checking.
14th.
14th. Okay. It will include a public hearing on the opt-out question. There is going to be an article in the June Chronicle explaining in simple terms. I was privileged to be given a copy of the article to look at, to be sure it was accurate, and it is, and it's very clear. This narrative that we need to go with the opt-out, Karen, would you describe what it is you think we need?
I think Janelle is probably better to describe what we need.
Well,
In terms
Janelle
of-
wrote us a document about why we should opt out,
Mhm.
and it was technical and interesting and accurate. And then I wrote a second document putting it all more in layman's terms. And I think we should include both documents for the public to peruse so that they understand what the issue is. And
Yeah,
of
I
course,
agree with you.
and of course, we will introduce the public hearing with an explanation. And hopefully, at this point, all of our commissioners are clear on why we have chosen to opt out. We voted on it last time. We went through a lot of explanations. If anybody feels unclear, send an email to me and Janelle and I will work on a reply. Sound reasonable? In that case, I accept a motion to adjourn.
Hey, Anna,
Yes.
second to last paragraph, just check the verbiage on before being able to do doing so.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
on what I wrote.
Yep.
Yeah, I've been through it once and found typos and things to fix. I'll
Yeah.
do it one more time and send a clean copy to you, Karen.
That's the only thing I see right off is the last three words of the second to last paragraph.
Okay. I have found that I usually need to edit everything I write at least 3 times before I perfect it.
I don't do it that many because I hand it to somebody else to do it for me.
I
Yeah.
know. I need to start doing that to James Laporta.
Thank you for persisting. It was a long meeting. We accomplished really important work. We are a little off our original schedule. We're still a month behind on the work that we had laid out for ourselves to do this reformatting, but we're really, really moving along. That was an important chapter. Thank you to everybody.
Yeah, boring but important.
And in the end, I want to give credit to the people who insisted we do it every sentence by sentence and paragraph by paragraph, because you guys turned out to be right.
Totally.
And it was much better than what I was thinking we would do. So kudos to you all.
Just so you
German?
know, I will not be at the next planning and zoning meeting because
Okay,
that's graduation that night.
The 14th.
And that means
Yeah,
Keith
the
won't be there
graduation
as
for
well.
CCS,
Yeah.
Cornwall School's graduation.
okay. I'm still waiting for, are you all stunned? We need a
I
motion
move to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay,
Have a good-
unanimous approval.
Thank
We're
you.
adjourning the meeting. Thank you, thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Ready?
I apologize for being late, Karen. I had technology issues. I'm so sorry.
Believe me, I can understand that, Michelle. Don't worry about it.
My computer.
Richard, I'm going to cut you off. You've stopped taping, correct?
I think he
Okay.
did.
All right.
So I apologize. My computer crashed.
Shut off, I'll get off or I'll be mute.
Meeting's adjourned. You need to stop your recording.
Okay. I got it. Yeah.